Everyone has a darker side to them than they let on, and the man behind the mouse is no exception. Hi, my name is Toby Desmond. I'm 27 years old, and my occupation consists of research on historical phenomenon. Occasionally, I'm forced to step out of my comfort zone to take a look at something, whether it be an old doll or anything creepy like that. However, those are bearable, as it's part of my job to examine such things. But there was one thing in particular, one thing that you'd never think to be different. I received a phone call early last Saturday. It seemed to be a regular client, though he didn't seem like he wanted to talk for very long. His tone was rushed, and he barely responded to any questions I asked him. He told me that he had an old VHS tape he found buried in his garage, and he wanted me to check it out. But before I could even agree to it, he just thanked me and hung up. Now, I'm not complaining about it. It's not often I get to check out something like that, so it piqued my interest. Plus, I had an old VCR I received from months before, so I was definitely going to see what was up. A few days after I received the call, a package came in the mail. The label on the wrapping read Disney in black marker, but nothing else. I thought I hit the jackpot. Not just because Disney was one of the biggest in animation ever, and getting an old tape like that was huge for someone like me, but also because I had a son, Max, who loved that kind of stuff. I thought it would make for some great father-son time to sit down and watch some old cartoons, so we did just that. The episode on the tape, White Noise. The episode started with quiet static, which didn't last for very long, then quickly faded to an old Disney title screen, but upside down. It was odd, to say the least, but that wasn't the only thing off about it. Instead of both Mickey and Minnie on the screen, there were two Mickeys. A plain white Mickey, which looked to be a sketch yet to be finished, and a normal colored one. But I didn't think too much of it. It wasn't anything creepy, just rather strange. The title screen quickly cut to the white, unfinished Mickey sitting in a chair by a small table, sporting a frown on his face. He didn't do much, just tapped his foot for a few moments, until the last, I'd say, half minute. Pete entered the room from behind Mickey, with a look of unease on his face, holding a baseball bat. His legs were noticeably shaking as he wandered closer to the mouse, raising the bat above his head. He stopped a few inches away from the chair Mickey was sitting in. Pete said something to himself, but it was too quiet to make out completely. Are you the Mickey closed his eyes and looked down to his knees. Yes, now do it, Mickey said, after which tears started streaming down Pete's face. He then swung the bat, hitting himself repeatedly over the head. Mickey started to grin and chuckle quietly. Pete's swings were getting noticeably harder and harder after each hit, and with each swing, Mickey's smile became bigger and bigger. Soon enough, his light chuckle had evolved into hysterical laughter. But eventually, Pete made his last swing and fell to the ground, not making a single movement afterward. The screen then cut to Pete lying on the floor with poorly drawn X's covering his eyes. Then the screen displayed a small line of text. Are you enjoying the show? Max and I looked at each other. A look of unease took over our faces. We didn't say anything. Instead, we just looked back at the screen. As we did so, the scene then changed to a normal colored Mickey walking down a dirt trail toward what seemed to be a small warehouse, with an old plane in front of it. He had the same silly grin he always did in his old cartoons this time, except every now and then the film in the tape would shift out of place, and I could swear it looked like he was just dragging his body in midair while he was moving. Eventually he reached the warehouse and walked up to the plane. Mickey climbed into the plane and ignited the engine, so naturally the propeller started to run. He then climbed back out of the plane and stood in front of it, tapping his foot with a concerned look on his face. Then he grinned and stuck his hand in the propeller. His expression then turned to dread as he started to scream while his hand was being mutilated, and Max grabbed a hold of my arm as we watched in horror. Mickey then pulled his arm away from the propeller and stared at it for a moment, then began to smile. He then turned his face toward the screen as it slowly panned toward him. Then it cut to black. I looked at Max. He was in utter shock. He looked up at me and asked what had happened, but I didn't have an answer. I couldn't tell him as I didn't know either. I was speechless. I didn't know what would happen. The black screen then abruptly cut to Mickey, standing in the corner of a dark room, nodding rapidly with a huge grin on his face. Max felt some sort of reassurance over this for some reason, as there wasn't anything utterly disturbing happening. Barely anything was visible, but occasionally, by looking closely, we could see Mickey twitching violently. After a few seconds or so, the screen started slowly panning out, away from Mickey, so it became even harder to see. We leaned in to try to get a better look. Huge mistake. As we leaned in to see better, the screen then rapidly sped into Mickey's face and brightened, revealing a gruesome, clawed, torn-up face with a massive grin, bearing human-like teeth, along with noticeably bloodshot eyes. Max went ballistic. He started to scream as he clung to my arm, as if for dear life. He started to cry as I held him close to my chest. Then he looked up at me. "Daddy, why is Mickey being so scary?" he asked as tears streamed down his face, still sobbing. I told him I didn't know. I had never in my life seen anything as horrifying as that, let alone in a Disney cartoon, which is made for children, for fucking children. I told Max to leave. I didn't want him to catch any more of it. He had seen enough. I wasn't sure that I wanted to keep watching myself, but I had to. I had to. Not because I'm an idiot, and it certainly wasn't because I wanted to write some cheesy campfire story, but for the sake of curiosity. It was literally pulling me in. I had to finish it. There was no way I could stop it. The episode then cut to a straight line of text in front of a jet black background. Ha 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 ha. No noise at all, just text. It then abruptly jumped to the mutilated Mickey face, closer to the screen than before, and a loud, distorted moan rang through the speakers. I closed my eyes to attempt to avoid the image, but I could still see it faintly in my head. After a few moments, everything stopped. I heard a faint, fuzzy sound. I opened my eyes and looked up at the screen to be met with static. I thought it was over. I let out a sigh of relief and reached for the remote sitting beside me. No! I stopped and looked back at the screen to find the static slowly fading, revealing a plain white Mickey face buried beneath the static. My mouth hung open while I stared at the mouse. It spoke to me. It knew I was trying to turn off the TV. "How did you?" I said, whispering to the screen. Mickey smiled, sporting a massive toothy grin. It heard me. "Your heart will suffer greatly," it said in a stern, deep voice. A series of ha-has then flashed rapidly in front of the static, along with a loud screeching sound. I had to cover my ears. It was so loud. The remote was right next to me. I could have at least tried to end it, but the horrid sound made it hard to move my hands from my ears. It didn't stop. I didn't care anymore, and I didn't care if I went deaf just to stop it. I reached for the remote and shut it off. rescuing most of my sanity. My ears rang for a good few minutes, but luckily they didn't explode. I looked over to the doorway to find Max standing there. I scolded him for not listening to me when I told him to stay away, but he didn't hear me. His eyes were glued to the screen, and he was frozen solid. "It's not over yet," he said, still staring at the screen. "What? What do you mean?" I asked him, but he didn't respond. Then the TV turned on. The TV turned itself on. I looked back to the screen to find what seemed to be a snuff recording of the front of Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. Then I looked back over to Max. He gave me a quick glance, then he redirected his attention to the screen. How the hell did he know it wasn't over? How the hell could he know? The episode then cut to the park versions of the mascots in what seemed to be a dank basement, standing perfectly in a line, facing the camera. I urged Max to get out once more, as if I could predict what was going to happen, but he wouldn't move. He just stared. The mascots started to laugh. It started out quiet, but then it got louder. Soon enough they were screaming, full on crying and screaming. Some of them started to break down onto their knees as they continued. Some of them just grabbed their heads and started thrashing around in place. But they didn't stop. They just fucking screamed. And on, and Max was just standing there perfectly still, staring at it all without batting an eye. I attempted to get up and to get him out of the room, but I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. I was paralyzed. "Max, can you hear me?" I yelled at him to attempt to break him out of his trance, but he didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. "Get out, Max, you've seen more than enough," I attempted to yell once more, but he just stared at the damn screen. It didn't even look like he was breathing at this point. His chest wasn't moving at all. Then the mascot stopped screaming. I looked back over to Max to find him crying. Streams of tears rolled down his face, but he remained motionless. The mascots then turned their heads toward the screen, then got up and stood in the same perfectly straight line they had before. They then slowly reached for their sides, and in the same manner pulled out large, gleaming knives. "Get out, Max!" I practically screamed that time. He started to cry even louder, as if he knew what was happening, even though his head was turned toward me. The mascots then raised the knives up to their own throats and slit them. "Max!" I screamed. They started thrashing around the room as pools of crimson started pouring out from the cavities in their necks. Half of them were borderline laughing while screaming, while the other half of them just screamed in undescribable agony. All the while, Max just stared at the bloody mess, while I tried to desperately hold back vomit. The episode then abruptly ended with a still shot of the now lifeless costumes lying sprawled out on the floor, with one of them holding a plain white card with the words "The End" scribbled onto it in Disney font. I looked over at Max. He wasn't crying anymore. Instead, he was staring at me now with a wide, unnerving grin on his face. He then raised his hand from his sides and placed them on his chin and scalp. "Suffer," he said. He then broke his neck with such force I didn't think he had. Then dropped to the floor with the stare and the smile still remaining. Everything was silent for a moment. Eventually I gathered what was left of my sanity and rushed over to him, trying my hardest to talk to him through the sobs and screams, even when I knew he was already gone. I then looked over to the TV, and in the middle of the screen I saw the plain white Mickey face, laughing, staring at me. Then it spoke to me once more. The darkest of secrets lie within the brightest of smiles. Do you see that now, Tobias? And the TV shut off, and I was left alone with my son's lifeless body. I started to cry as I buried my face into Max's chest, holding on to his hand as it all came to a close. But my crying ceased, and I let go of my son's hand as I looked up to the screen and started screaming at it. Fuck you! Fuck you, you stupid fucking rat! I hate you! I hate you! I screamed, thinking that the thing could hear me. And it did. It heard me well. It heard me very well. The TV then cut on, revealing a gravestone with Max Desmond imprinted on the top, showing his exact date of birth, as well as the day of his death, which was that day. All the while, white noise raved in the background, slowly evolving into mad laughing. The screen then cut to the white mouse, continuously laughing, and he didn't stop. I wanted to laugh too. I really did. The whole situation was a fucking mess, and it was my fault. All of it. Being a shitty father was all I could take. Hell, I was technically the one responsible for Max's death, but I didn't care anymore. I really didn't. But I wanted the laughing to stop. I got up and quickly reached for the power button on the side of the TV, but something held me back from doing so. My arms were being forced behind me as the laughter slowly ceased. Then a voice I hadn't heard before came through the speakers and spoke to me as I remained in my submission. We're not done with you yet.